The cubs had killed 3 Kithoran handlers already this week, but they were now climbing on the human intern like she was a jungle gym. Dr. Zelax's crystalline form flickered amber, the xenobiological equivalent of a heart attack, as he watched from the observation booth. Emma Johnson, all 5'7" of unremarkable human flesh, stood in the center of high-security containment sector 7. According to YouTube analytics, 99.3% of viewers are not subscribed. That's a huge number. By subscribing the channel that is completely free, you'll help support the channel and never miss fresh content. With one Vexthul predator cub wrapped around her left arm like a furred bracelet and 2 others circling her legs with what could only be described as playful enthusiasm. She's petting it, Zelax whispered, his telepathic field fragmenting at the edges. Why is she petting our most classified weapon? Commander Kael'thas hit the emergency alert before Zelax finished the sentence. Red light flooded the observation chamber. Klaxons screamed through the station's corridors. Response teams thundered toward the containment sector with tranquilizer arrays and plasma barriers. Emma didn't flinch. Yeah, they're actually kind of cute when they're not actively trying to murder you. She called toward the observation window, not even looking up. She scratched behind the smallest cub's ear with the casual precision of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. Which, technically, she had. Just never with creatures engineered to kill anything larger than microscopic. The cub purred. Actually purred. Its 3-chambered heart rate registered on every monitor in the station, and not a single reading suggested anything remotely resembling predatory arousal. Security override. Pull her out now. Kael'thas's command voice shattered through the intercom, with enough force to rattle the transparent aluminum barrier between observation and containment. Emma glanced up with the expression of someone mildly inconvenienced by a meeting reminder. Relax. One's literally using my arm as a pillow. She held up her right forearm, where the largest cub, designated Specimen 7 Delta in military documentation, though Emma had apparently named it Patches based on the moth-wing pattern across its shoulder, had draped itself across her guard plating like a scarf made of teeth. Zelax's warning systems were screaming contradictions so loud his visual sensors were starting to strobe. Contain the human, sedate the specimens. Kael'thas's orders crashed over the comm system like weapons fire. But the response team froze when they entered the sector. 3 soldiers in full threat gear, weapons hot, staring at a mid-level xenobiology intern who appeared to be conducting some kind of extremely dangerous petting session with 3 apex predators that, according to every database in the Kithoran Empire, should have disemboweled her within seconds of entering their space. Emma didn't bother turning around. Hey, if you could maybe not storm in all aggressive? You're going to stress them out, and trust me. Stressed predators is how you end up with the killing spree situation you had last Tuesday. One of the response team members lowered their weapon. Sir, they're not showing any aggression markers. Of course they're not, Emma said, raising her left arm higher, the one with the cub still wrapped around it. The smallest predator scrambled higher, claws finding purchase on her shoulder, perching there like it had won the greatest prize in the galaxy. Which, in its limited predator brain, it apparently had. They're just animals. The smallest cub, Patches apparently, scrambled higher up Emma's arm with single-minded determination, tiny claws finding purchase against the reinforced plating of her guard. Emma didn't resist. She laughed, an actual human laugh that echoed through the containment sector, like she wasn't standing in the middle of what should have been a slaughterhouse. Oh, you want the high ground? Sure, buddy. She raised her arm higher, the motion smooth and deliberate. Every tactical manual in the Kithoran strategic database suggested this would trigger predatory strike response, heightened prey behavior, vulnerability display, classic aggression escalation. Patches settled onto her shoulder like he'd found the most comfortable throne in existence. The other two cubs immediately abandoned their leg-circling pattern and launched themselves at Emma's body, clambering over her with what the behavioral analysis team would later classify as unprecedented enthusiasm for non-lethal interaction. They didn't bite. They didn't scratch in killing patterns. They climbed, stumbled over each other's small bodies, and made sounds that, according to 3 separate acoustic analysts cross-referencing xenobiological databases, had never been documented in Vex Thule specimens before. They were chirping, actual chirping. "Tranquilizer team, move in." Kael'thas's voice cracked across the emergency channel. Dr. Vexia burst through the containment sector doors with a medical team carrying 3 loaded syringes. The liquid inside glowed with the pale blue luminescence of sedative compounds designed to drop an apex predator in 2.3 seconds. She raised the first tranquilizer with a steady hand born from 30 years of handling dangerous xenobiological specimens. Emma waved her off like she was shooing away an insect. "Don't," Emma said. Not aggressive, not commanding, just factual. "You're going to stress them out." "They're predators," Vexia said, advancing. "They kill everything they encounter." "No," Emma corrected, scratching one of the mid-sized cubs behind what might have been ears. "They're stressed predators that kill everything they encounter. There's a difference." She turned slightly, letting Patches adjust his grip on her shoulder. The cub actually chirped in approval. "You've been keeping them in fight or flight mode. They're not aggressive. They're terrified." Zilax's form in the observation booth flickered between amber and deep purple. Confusion mixing with something approaching, horror. He accessed the genetic profile on specimen 7 alpha through 7 gamma. Combat engineered. Predatory aggressive baseline. Behavioral inhibitors coded directly into their DNA to prevent socialization bonds. None of those inhibitors were activating. "Separation protocol," Kael'thas commanded. Security teams moved to create a physical barrier between Emma and the observation booth. Standard quarantine procedure. The cubs immediately started following Emma, not attacking the soldiers. They padded after her with what could only be described as concern, small chirps escalating in frequency and pitch. Emma stopped dead. "Yeah, that's not happening. If you separate me from them now, you're going to trigger actual aggressive response. They're bonded. They think I'm their social reference." Vexia lowered the tranquilizer. "That's impossible. Their genetic structure prevents social bonding with non-Vex Thule specimens." "So, I used to work with tigers and leopards," Emma said casually, as though she was discussing the weather. "Back on Earth, before I took this job. Grew up in a wildlife rehabilitation sanctuary. You'd be amazed what animals can do when you don't actively terrorize them." The observation booth went silent. Zilax's form flickered between 5 different color states in rapid succession. He opened a direct channel to the Kithoran High Council. "Command, this is Research Station Kepler 7. We have a situation. The Vex Thule weapons program. We need to escalate this immediately." Emma sat cross-legged on the containment floor with specimen 7 Delta dangling from her hand like a furry sock, and she was explaining the collapse of 50 years of military doctrine like she was discussing basic animal husbandry. "They're animals, right?" Emma said, letting the cub gnaw gently on her finger without pulling away. "They just need to know you're not prey. With big cats back home, it's about confidence, body language, and consistency." These guys respond to voice modulation better than Earth predators, actually. Less aggressive baseline. Vexia stood frozen, her xenobiological frame vibrating at frequencies that suggested either profound scientific interest or an imminent neural shutdown. Probably both. The genetic engineering is supposed to override all mammalian socialization patterns, Vexia said, her voice hollow. They should recognize only pheromone markers we programmed. Nothing else should matter. Emma shrugged, which caused Patches to shift his weight on her shoulder. Yeah, but have you tried, just being nice to them? The words hung in the containment sector like a physical force. Zillax accessed the Behavioral Science Division's archives in real time, cross-referencing handlers' psychological profiles against the cubs' medical histories. What he found made his crystalline form flicker through 7 different distress colors. The handlers had been afraid. Every single one. Psychological evaluations showed trauma responses, hypervigilance, adrenal overstimulation. They'd approach the cubs like soldiers approaching enemy combatants, which meant the cubs, despite genetic engineering designed to suppress social bonding, had responded to that fear with defensiveness. The handlers weren't encountering predatory aggression. They were encountering fear-based retaliation. And Emma had walked in with no fear whatsoever. We studied weaponized aggression, Vexia whispered, pulling up her own research files. We never studied baseline predator behavior. We assumed they were incapable of it. We engineered them specifically to be incapable of it. Containment protocols suddenly made no sense. Separation barriers became irrelevant. Aggression stimulus profiles, all designed to maintain threat status, had been actively counterproductive. Every military doctrine built around keeping these creatures in fight-or-flight mode. Warfare Ministry is requesting urgent meeting, Kailthas announced, his voice tight. Command wants full briefing on human methodology. They're talking about weaponization potential. Emma didn't hear him. She was watching one of the mid-sized cubs, 7 Beta, the aggressive one according to all documentation, attempt to mimic the sound she'd just made. A laugh. The cub's 3-chambered throat produced something that might have been an acoustic approximation of human laughter. Then 7 Gamma tried. Failed. Tried again. Oh, she's a little mimic. That's adorable, Emma cooed, completely oblivious to the fact that she was documenting the first evidence of complex vocalization learning outside of designed parameters. Vexia's sensors locked onto the cub's genetic readouts. There's no vocalization teaching protocols in their code, she said, her scientific voice breaking slightly. They're not supposed to be able to do this. They're learning from observation. Sir, the Warfare Ministry is demanding access to the humans' methodology, Kailthas reported. His command voice had taken on an edge of desperate bureaucratic panic. They want to weaponize this. Apparently, if socialization can be induced, perhaps weaponized socialization could... We can't, Zillax interrupted, his tone carrying the weight of absolute certainty. If these creatures can be socialized, we've spent 50 years funding the wrong approach entirely. The Warfare Ministry doesn't understand what they're asking for. Neither did we. He opened a classified channel directly to High Command. We need to shut this down, immediately, not the research, the military application, if the Empire realizes what we've actually built here. Zillax paused, watching Emma teach Patches how to sit for a treat. We've been wrong about everything, and the human doesn't even know it. Emma was simply doing what she'd always done, working with animals, being kind to them, treating them like living things instead of problems to solve through intimidation. The galaxy was about to change because one human had forgotten that anyone expected her to be afraid. The high command briefing lasted 7 hours. By hour 4, military doctrine was collapsing. By hour 6, the political implications had become undeniable. By hour 7, the Kithoran Empire's entire strategic approach to predator weaponization had been classified as under emergency review pending fundamental re-evaluation. The military-industrial complex that had dominated Kithoran policy for 50 years now faced something worse than defeat: obsolescence through human incompetence. Emma didn't attend the briefing. She was in the observation booth with 3 sleeping predator cubs arranged across her lap like particularly dangerous throw pillows, occasionally scratching behind their ears in her sleep. Xilax entered quietly, crystalline form dimmed to near invisibility, carrying the weight of an empire's recalibration. He settled across from Emma, maintaining careful distance from the cubs. "How did you know?" he asked, his telepathic field colored with genuine confusion. "How did you understand what our entire civilization's military science could not? Our civilization is built on the premise that these creatures are inherently unsocial killers." Emma opened one eye, carefully avoiding disturbing the cubs. "I didn't know anything," she said, voice rough with sleep. "I just treated them like animals instead of, I don't know, your version of weapons. They're literally just predators. We have thousands of those back on Earth that aren't murder machines when you give them a chance." She adjusted one of the cubs, Patches, who was starting to slide off her leg. Tigers, lions, leopards. People used to hunt them for sport, fear them, kill them. But then some humans decided to study them instead of just fighting them. Turns out apex predators are just animals. They have social structures. They have preferences. They can bond with other species under the right circumstances. Vexia entered the observation booth, her xenobiological frame moving with purpose that suggested she'd been conducting research for the past hour straight. Which she had. "She's right," Vexia said, accessing data across her personal neural network. "We engineered behavioral aggression into their genetic structure. It was a deliberate choice. When you remove the fear stimulus environment, you remove the aggression trigger. It's not suppressed. It was never baseline. We created it. Plus positive reinforcement and consistent social bonding," Emma added, now fully awake. "Same with house cats, actually. Everyone forgets apex predators are literally just animals. Creatures with brains, nervous systems, emotions. Who knew, right?" The sarcasm was gentle, almost sympathetic. Kael'thas's voice crackled over the secure channel from the command center. "Containment breach classified as humanitarian breakthrough. Military contracts suspended pending re-evaluation. Cubs approved for transfer to specialist care." A pause. "Your specialist care, apparently." Emma didn't smile, but something warm flickered across her expression. "So, I get to keep them." "Command has decided that you should," Xilax said slowly. "The alternative is returning them to an environment specifically designed to make them hostile, which we now understand was counterproductive to their actual nature." Vexia and Kael'thas moved to the observation window, standing in silence as they processed the magnitude of what had just occurred. "They didn't approach this with our technology," Kael'thas said quietly. "They didn't approach this with our science or our doctrine. They approached it with something older," Vexia added, her scientific mind finding poetry in the realization. "Observation, trust, patience. The basics of understanding living things instead of categorizing them as resources or threats. They treated weapons like family," Xilax finished, his crystalline form flickering with colors that suggested something approaching wonder. It never occurred to us that was possible. To see something engineered for destruction and respond with gentleness instead of fear. To remove the fear and discover that nothing else remained. Emma yawned, scratched patches behind his ears as he chirped softly in his sleep, and didn't seem to realize she'd just overturned the foundation of an empire's military philosophy. "So when do I get them officially transferred to my quarters?" she asked, completely unaware that she was about to become the most classified research asset in Kithoran history. 3 months later, Kepler-7 had transformed into something nobody had predicted. An intergalactic research facility dedicated to behavioral socialization studies. The Vexthul Predator Project, once classified as military weapons development, was now officially recognized as Advanced Xenobiological Companion Integration Research. Emma Johnson's new title was Senior Behavioral Integration Specialist, a position that hadn't existed before anyone bothered to ask a human how to care for dangerous animals. The cubs were thriving. Patches had learned 17 commands. 7 Beta could identify individual humans by scent and respond to voice modulation cues that suggested genuine linguistic comprehension emerging. 7 Gamma spent most afternoons mimicking Emma's laugh with increasingly accurate precision. All 3 had formed pack structures that behavioral analysis now classified as emotionally complex social hierarchies previously thought impossible. In other words, they were happy. Emma was filing adoption paperwork in her workspace. Somehow that existed now, when Zillax entered. His crystalline form had taken on a permanent coloration that suggested something approximating contentment. "Emma, Command wants to discuss your contract extension," Zillax said carefully. "And salary increase." Emma didn't look up from the food requisition form she was reviewing. "Cool. Does it include better food for these guys? The current protein synthesis is adequate, but I want to see if we can optimize their nutritional profile. They want your input on military doctrine revision," Zillax continued. 17 other projects are experiencing similar stagnation. High Command is requesting human perspective consultation. Emma laughed, scratching behind Patches's ears. "Yeah, we call that actually thinking about what you're doing back home." Patches chirped in agreement. In the council chambers on Kithora Prime, the question echoed through diplomatic channels. How did a mid-level human intern solve a problem 50 years of military science couldn't? The answer terrified and fascinated every civilization watching. Humans saw animals first, weapons second. The galaxy's entire civilization structure reversed that order. What else were they missing? Across 17 military projects, human consultants suddenly appeared. None of them were trained in military science. Several were former teachers, mechanics, therapists, and one certified dog groomer. They asked the same kinds of questions Emma had asked. They approached problems differently. They treated systems like they treated living things, instead of treating living things like systems. The results were consistently impossible. Emma remained completely unaware that she'd become the template for a paradigm shift. She took the consulting gig the same way she'd taken every other job. Seriously, but casually. The cubs followed her everywhere. Furry proof that treating beings like individuals instead of categories actually worked. In the cafeteria, surrounded by 3 predator cubs performing increasingly complex trick sequences in exchange for treats, Emma demonstrated what Kithoran military science had forgotten existed: gentleness. Vexia watched from the doorway, genuinely moved by something her species had systematized away. Zillax joined her silently. "She's changed everything," Zilak said. And she still calls it a job. That's the human gift, Vexia replied. They see crisis and just handle it, like it's obvious. Patches caught Emma's laugh and mimicked it perfectly. Emma beamed, scratching his chin. She's getting so smart, Emma said, completely unaware that she was discussing what would become interspecies communication breakthrough research. In 6 months, we might be looking at genuine linguistic acquisition. The cubs purred, or whatever they did, and the future of the galaxy shifted quietly from weapons to possibilities. No fanfare, no announcement. Just one human treating living things like they mattered. And an entire civilization finally learning why that was the most revolutionary thing they'd ever witnessed.